Power is a heady drug, isn't it? We are fascinated by those who have it, how they wield it, and how they got it. But what if we told you that not all power is created equal? In fact, some positions of power may seem glorious from the outside, but behind the gilded gates, there's a different story altogether. Today we are going to explore one such position, that of a medieval king. You might think it was a pretty great gig, right? A medieval king sat on a throne, wore fancy clothes, and probably had a good amount of bling. But looks can be deceiving. In this video, we will dive deep into the life of a medieval king and expose why being a king in the Middle Ages was actually one big, fat headache. Welcome to my channel, and today let's find out why being a medieval king sucked. A medieval king's life was a never-ending journey. Unlike the modern concept of a nation-state, where a monarch may reside permanently in one palace, medieval kings were constantly on the move. Their year was divided between multiple castles, each requiring attention, and none offering the comfort of home. Why? Because a king's job was to be a consumer, not a producer. His role was to show up at a town or castle, live like a god among men, and basically eat them out of house and home. The king and his retinue, comprising of nobility, advisors, soldiers, bards, and hangers-on, would descend upon a place, consuming all available food and resources. Then they would pack up and move to the next location, repeating the process. This was not a leisurely jaunt or a vacation. It was a necessity to ensure no one place was completely stripped bare. Instead, the king spread his consumption across the land, making sure everyone paid their dues in kind while enjoying the benefits of his temporary presence. So instead of cozying up in one palace, the king was constantly on the road, far from the comforts of home. Speaking of homes, a king's home wasn't really his. Let us explain. A king's power was not absolute, as he was surrounded by numerous potential enemies, from disgruntled vassals to ambitious relatives. Each of these individuals or factions had their own agendas, which might not always align with the king's. The king was thus constantly striving to maintain control, making it impossible for him to relax and enjoy his home or property. He always had to be vigilant, ready to defend his throne against any threat. Hygiene was a big problem back then. Cities were dirty, houses were cramped, and most people didn't understand how germs spread. There were open sewers, no real sanitation systems, and people just dumped their waste wherever they pleased. Also, there wasn't much understanding of diseases, so a small illness could quickly become a deadly plague. Even kings weren't safe from this. They lived in the same unsanitary conditions as everyone else, and when someone sneezed in their general direction, they risked catching something serious. And given the lack of medical knowledge, many infections went untreated, leading to all sorts of health issues for your average medieval king. A king's health was always in peril, thanks to his diet. Kings ate a lot of meat and ale, but not much fresh fruit or veggies. This led to health problems like gout and scurvy. Gout is a painful condition where joints become inflamed and very tender. Scurvy makes your gums bleed and your teeth fall out. Neither is fun, but they were common for kings because of what they ate. Basically, being a king didn't keep you from getting sick or having bad health. In fact, it made it more likely because of the way they lived. Being a king was dangerous. Kings often met their end through violence. Whether it was getting whacked during a battle, getting poisoned by an enemy, or even their own family member, or meeting a sticky end while trying to escape capture. Kingship came with a target on one's back, and no one was above taking a royal life. Being a king meant that he was the ultimate decision maker. He was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Every decision he made affected his kingdom and its people, which meant that he carried the crushing responsibility of being right all the time. As there was no formal legal system, the king was often left to decide a person's fate based on his own judgment. It was a lonely task with immense consequences. Kings rarely chose their spouses. Marriages were arranged for political reasons, not love. The king's wife could be a pawn in a game of alliances, a tool to secure his power or expand his territory. He had no say in who he wed, nor did he usually have the freedom to choose to remain unmarried. Arranged marriages were common and sometimes resulted in hostility between the king and his bride, leading to unhappy and loveless relationships. A medieval king's first duty was to be a warrior. He was expected to lead his troops into battle, defend his land, and protect his people. But this meant that the king was often injured, captured, or killed in battle. It was not a cushy desk job, but a dangerous and demanding one. A king's days were filled with non-stop work. He wasn't lounging around doing nothing. In fact, his schedule was packed. From settling disputes between nobles to managing the kingdom's finances to responding to countless petitions and complaints. A king's to-do list was endless. There was little time for leisure. The constant anxiety surrounding the succession of the throne was a major headache for medieval kings. Unlike today, there were no clear rules for inheritance. Without a clear heir, a king's death could plunge the kingdom into chaos and bloodshed as ambitious relatives and powerful nobles fought for the throne. This meant that every king lived under the shadow of potential usurpation, knowing that his death could spark a civil war. The crown often came with a hefty price tag. Castles, wars, and lavish court expenses meant that many kings were broke. All the bling and trappings of power were expensive to maintain, forcing kings to get creative in raising funds. A medieval king could not truly be alone. He was surrounded by courtiers, servants, and sycophants at all times, making privacy and solitude a luxury he could not afford. It was hard to be the king and have your say. Medieval kings were expected to be devout Christians. Failure to uphold the church's moral code could result in excommunication by the Pope, potentially costing the king his kingdom. The pressure to be a good Christian was immense and often at odds with the realities of royal life. A medieval king's authority was not absolute. Powerful noble families could gang up and defy him, forcing him to compromise or risk open rebellion. It was a constant tightrope walk between keeping the peace and maintaining power. Famine and crop failure were constant threats. A bad harvest could mean widespread starvation, and the king was ultimately responsible for the well-being of his people. This meant that a medieval king's shoulders were burdened with the weight of feeding his kingdom, adding to the immense pressure he already faced. A medieval king's life was short by modern standards. Many did not live past their 40th birthday. Violence, poor health, and constant stress took their toll, ensuring that few kings enjoyed a long and peaceful reign. The king's children were not his own in the emotional sense. They were political pawns to be married off for strategic gain, often at a very young age. This meant that the royal family was cold and distant, with little room for genuine affection. A medieval king had to endure endless advice and demands from counselors, nobles, and the church. He rarely had the freedom to follow his own instincts or desires. Last but not least, the public image of a king was carefully crafted through myth and propaganda. Beneath the armor and robes, he was just a man trying to balance immense stress, loneliness, and the constant fear of being overthrown. So there you have it. 12 reasons why being a medieval king totally sucked. Contrary to popular belief, being in power was not all glitz and glamour. In fact, it came with a host of challenges and responsibilities that we often forget about when we look back at history. Hopefully, this video has given you a new perspective on the life of a medieval king. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating historical tales. Thanks for watching.